What is good, Whisper Nation? It is April 7th, and we're going to be talking about those second-year running backs right here on the Fantasy Whispers.
Right here.
That's right. Second-year running backs, as my partner Johnny just said. But if you are hearing my voice or seeing my beautiful mug, do us a huge favor and hit that like button and share this on whatever platform you are on. It really helps us with the algorithms, helps us grow our channel. If you are not growing in this life, you are dying, and we do not want to die. So please help our channel continue to breathe that virtual air by sharing this video. If you are new to the Fantasy Whispers, welcome. Please consider hitting us up with that follow or a subscribe on whatever platform you find us on. We release fantasy football content daily. You can find us and all of our past shows on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Spotify. Just search the Fantasy Whispers or go to thefantasywhispers.com. Everything is there. Johnny, we're doing it. We're going to talk these second-year running backs. We were talking about at the top of this show here. We were talking about it a little bit on our mock drafts we've been doing, which you guys can all catch on Monday. We go live there doing our mock drafts with some people in the industry, our buddy Austin, contributor Austin, all these different people in the community join us. And one of the recurring themes was the second-year running backs. There's a stable of them within the second round, third round, depending on the size of your league, that we're seeing in ADP. And Johnny, we wanted to jump into that. But before we talk about those guys, the running backs, second-year running backs, you had a couple of questions you wanted to get at me and Whisper Nation. So Whisper Nation, let us know on whatever platform you're on. Comment your answer to some of these questions. Johnny, what do you got for us?
Well, we might be talking about these second-year running backs, Travis, which we both love. A lot of people love, but I do have to take a second before we jump into that. I am going on my today is my 3rd year wedding anniversary. So I want to give a big shout out to my wife. Without her, none of this would be possible. So big shout out to my wife, Jade. Happy anniversary. And without further ado.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on. I want to say happy anniversary to both you two as well. Johnny is not kidding when he says that without Jade, this would not be possible. She's made a lot of sacrifices in her life. Johnny's made a lot of sacrifices in his life to help us both pursue this. And I just got to give a bunch of love out to Jade and Johnny on their special day. Whisper Nation, drop a happy anniversary in the comments if you want to, because these guys, they're a great couple. They're a model for what you want. They're hashtag goals. So give them some love, guys.
I appreciate that. Big Travie was one of my groomsmen. So 3 years ago today, we were
cutting it up on the dance floor, dude,
and smashing some beers and whiskey.
No, I don't know about any of that, dude. I'm a good Christian boy.
Oh yeah, I don't do that. All right, so let's jump in this first segment here. Before we like to warm up, I do appreciate everyone who is joining us in during the show right now. Josh A, real quick, Cooked FN, shout out to you guys. Appreciate the love. All right, Travis, would you rather? Okay, we're talking RB2s today. And so a lot of those RB2s or second year running backs are going in the second round, right? So I'm going to give you a list of guys. I want you to tell me who you would rather have. All right. And then there will be a little trick or a twist at the end. Okay. So just bear with me. I'll let you in on that detail in just a second. Okay. So there's going to be 9 questions here. I want you to tell me who you would rather have. All right. Of the 2. Okay. And these have to do with the second year running backs. Okay. So would you rather have Zeke or JT? Jonathon Taylor.
This one's tough for me. I keep battling with
all
Jonathon
these are going to be tough, dude.
If he's priced high, I'm actually going to go with Zeke here.
Okay, Zeke, we got one. All right. Second question. They're only going to get more difficult, just FYI. Okay. Jonathon Taylor or Saquon?
Oh, this is easy. Saquon Barkley for me.
Yeah. Okay, Saquon. Aaron Jones
was easy because I wanted to mess with him.
All right. Aaron Jones or Cam Akers?
Give me Aaron Jones, baby.
All right. Would you rather have James Robinson or Tyreek Hill?
I'd rather take Tyreek Hill.
Okay. Wow, we're striking out right now with these second-year running backs. Austin Eckler or Dobbins? J.K. Dobbins.
I'm going to take the upside of J.K. Dobbins here.
Okay, first rookie selection there. CEH or Miles Sanders?
Give me CEH. I like the bounce back this year. I have some questions about that Eagles offense, but I think it's by a hair. It's CEH.
All right. Antonio Gibson or Joe Mixon?
Ooh, this one is tough, man. I love the value of Joe Mixon going where he's going, but I think that Antonio Gibson's like shine is really doing it for me. I'm gonna go with Gibson here.
All right, that one, like I was like, whoo, that one was a tricky one. When I wrote that down, I was like, this one's a really good one. All right, DeAndre Swift or David Montgomery?
Man, this is another one. And Montgomery is priced so absurdly lower than these other guys that are in their second year.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't get it. I think I would rather have Swift on pure upside alone.
Okay. All right. And then the last one here, would you rather have Zack Moss or a year supply of Delight coffee, the breakfast buzzes? And for Whisper Nation who's listening and tuning in right now, Delight is a like a local restaurant. I don't think they're
like a cafe restaurant. They do sandwiches and breakfast, and they also do some coffees out there in the Scottsdale area.
And they do this breakfast buzz.
He turned me on to this place. They make this protein shake, coffee infused protein shake in the morning with banana, chocolate, peanut butter, and this thing, man. It's only like 400 calories. It's not even that bad. It's just a beast of a shake, and you just start your morning off with it, and you feel like you got breakfast, you got energy, you got protein all in one pack. And I'll tell you what, this is not even close. I would take a lifetime supply.
No, it's not a lifetime. I knew that was too easy. It would be a year supply, or like a year card.
Honestly, I would take a week's supply over than that with
Zack Moss. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Josh A says you can get bigger than Zack Moss with that protein shake. He's not kidding, man. That massive gains with that shake, man. If you guys are ever in the Phoenix area, hit up Delight. We're trying to get sponsored here. That's what this whole segment was about. Johnny just wants to get a sponsor.
Right. I'm going to post this video. Zack Moss or a breakfast buzz.
Those are some good ones, though.
Okay. Those were some good ones. Okay. So just to recap real quick, you took Zeke over JT, Saquon over JT, Aaron Jones over Cam Akers, James Robinson over Tyreek Hill over James Robinson. You took J.K. Dobbins over Austin Eckler. Took CEH over Miles Sanders, Antonio Gibson over Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift over David Montgomery, and you took the Delight over Zack Moss. Whisper Nation, we want to know what you think of these breakdowns. Let us know who you're choosing of those guys and why. And then as we move on to this next part of the show, Travis, my job here, so you only chose, you chose 4 rookies in total. But I think a couple of those guys could be a little bit up for debate. So we'll revisit this after this show. After we give our rundown, I'll see if I can convince you of a couple of these these second-year running backs, and then we'll revisit to close out the show. See if we change your mind at all. All right.
Sounds good, Johnny. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about these rookie running backs coming into their second year. Let's look back at 2020 and just quickly go down the top 10 or so of the rookies that were the highest scorers in fantasy points per game from the running back position. So James Robinson led the field with 17.9, followed by Jonathon Taylor with 16.9, DeAndre Swift with 14.6. Gibson came in 4th with 14.4. We had Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 13.5. Salvon Ahmed got in with 11.5 in the 6th position. Remember, he didn't play a full slate of games because they had some injuries to Myles Gaskin as well. J.K. Dobbins, 11.2, was good for 7th. And then tied for 8th is Cam Akers and Zack Moss with 7.8 points per game. This is a really good piece of perspective, Johnny, because we look at a guy like Cam Akers and Zack Moss, who are at polar opposites of excitement right now heading into this year. Mm-hmm. But really, the production was similar in both of them last year as far as a points per game basis. Now, we know that stat does not say everything about what they were able to do.
Listen, Whisper Nation knows what you're trying to do over here with Zack Moss. You're trying to prep him up and talk him up. But
I think we need to understand, though, that and we'll talk a little bit about Cam Akers. It's an interesting point that I think we're trying to crown his ass a little early here, and that's based on some rightful stuff that we got to talk about. But it'll be interesting to talk about that. Let's start with Jonathon Taylor, Johnny. I think that's where we got to start here. He's definitely the highest ADP of all the second-year guys. We were seeing him go as number 4, number 5 off the board in mock drafts so far this early offseason. And why not? Finishes the RB4 in standard and the RB6 in PPR. We saw this kind of roller coaster year for Taylor, okay? Week 10 was one of his worst games at Tennessee. He had only 9 touches for 37 yards. Then he had the Green Bay game. In week 11, gets 26 touches. Then he gets COVID, or at least is on the COVID list, misses week 12 versus Tennessee, and then absolutely goes nuclear, Johnny, over the final 5 weeks. 21 touches was his average. He averaged 144.6 all-purpose yards, scored 8 touchdowns in that stretch. After returning from COVID and that list that he was on, no other running back scored more points than Jonathon Taylor from weeks 13 through 17. So we talked about him averaging, Johnny, as the number 2, 16.9 points per game. That's heavily weighted by the 26 PPR fantasy points per game that he averaged in weeks 13 through 17. So he really had a combination of getting more touches. And then I think what you're going to add is that he didn't face a lot of tough competition either.
Yeah, that's my major complaint right now is that, I understand how he finished the end of the season, Travis, and that's all good and dandy. And trust me, like I definitely think that, Jonathon Taylor is going to be one of these better running backs come these next few years. But let's just put into perspective and just cool down a little bit on some of these, second-year running backs coming in here, or even other positions. We'll be talking about wide receivers on Friday. But let's actually dive into what Jonathon Taylor did. He did explode for sure, but in reality, he only faced 2 top 10 rushing defenses all season. And in particular, he had a very nice schedule at the end of the year, which you talked about how he monstrally broke off. He had Houston and Jacksonville, the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, 3 of the last 5 games. And then if you even take week 14, he played the Las Vegas Raiders and they were ranked 24th. So they were a bottom 10 in the rushing defense, Travis. And then on top of that, let's just look at what else he's got to face. When you took the Baltimore game and the Cleveland game, they were weeks 5 and weeks 9. Now, it's hard to get a full picture of what he could possibly do because in those 2 games, when he did face a difficult defense, he did get 55% snap share in week 5 against Cleveland, but it was 12 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. The touchdown, he ended up getting 4 fantasy points that week. Against Baltimore in week 9, however, different story, 8.4 fantasy points. He only did see 31% snap share, 6 carries for 27 yards and a touchdown. So the touchdown saved him in both games. Now, if you look at the schedule coming up this year, Travis, we don't know the dates, of course, because that stuff hasn't been released yet, but we do know the teams, right? And there are 3 teams that he'll face that were in 8 of last year in run defense. That's Tampa Bay, LA Rams, and San Francisco 49ers. I would have a high guarantee that those 3 have a good potential to be top 10 again this next year. And so he's got three difficult matchups there. You look at Carson Wentz under Frank Reich. When he did play under him, he only threw to the running back 13% of the time. So that, we talk about the major upside of Jonathon Taylor if he can get that rushing or that receiving ability, but Carson Wentz doesn't tend to usually throw to the running back position. Now, I will say, since Reich has come over to Indianapolis, they have averaged about 20% target market share to the running back. So that is a little bit of a good sign. But then you're also talking about Marlon Mack coming in. I think it's an underrating signing. I think people are writing him off a lot because of the Achilles injury. I think, technology and things how it is today, Travis, I think Marlon Mack can come back
to be 100 years old.
Dude.
Is that what you're getting?
Dude,
at?
I read a story just last week where they were putting pig's heart and the humans, dude.
Yeah,
it didn't work. They died, but
I want to bring up to your point here. Aowen Kelly over here on YouTube says, "Love Taylor. Any concerns he won't be getting the touches until later this year, later in the year." I think the reason he got a lot of the work last year was a couple things. He was shaking off issues that he was having with vision, issues that he was having as a rookie coming into this game. This game gets tougher at that level. We obviously know that. We know that this line, he was not hitting his blocks in time, and we knew that he took time. I mean, we had the COVID offseason, right? So we didn't have the learning experience, the reps that he actually needed to get in there. We do know that he only dropped one pass. Okay. And the big question for Jonathon Taylor coming into last year was, could he catch? We didn't see it a lot when he played in college. Well, he could catch last year. He proved that. And Johnny has concerns about if the target market share will be there for running backs under Reich. I have to think that it will happen there. It happened towards the end of last year with Phillip Rivers. Now we know that's quarterback based, of course, but Frank Reich is also a guy that will get that involved in the offense. And let's not act like the Indianapolis squad is so stacked with other weapons that they won't need to throw to the running back. I think that they have weapons that are unproven. They've got guys, outside of T.Y. Hilton that are guys that need development. And yes, they could develop under Wentz, but I think Wentz is going to try and be smart, and so is Frank Reich, to get Wentz back into this. Because remember, Wentz's confidence is also shaken as well, coming from Philly and being out of there. Now, I think that you are right in the Mack signing, that it is a little bit more underrated than people think. If he comes back healthy, Mack is going to be a guy that's a better version of Jordan Wilkins, who was getting splitting work with Jonathon Taylor to start last year. Now, what's going to be the biggest caveat for all of this that we're talking about concern? The fact that Jonathon Taylor is one of the better running back prospects we've seen come out of college in the last few years. And so if he comes in and he just does what he's supposed to do and dominates, they're going to have no choice but to continue to feed him the rock. So I would say that, yes, there's an opportunity where his upside gets capped here, but talent always rises to the surface. So I would think that in my case, I think that Jonathon Taylor will rise to the top here.
Or like Macho Man Randy Savage says, the cream always rises to the top.
Yes, exactly. What a great rendition of the late great Macho Man.
Got it,
Kelly, I got to give shout out to everybody in here. A1 Kelly, who's firing off some questions and comments. Jaws Whedon, love you, man. You've been in here since day one. Jacob Bley, obviously #1 fan. And we talked about Josh A. and Cooked FN. Just thanks for being in here, guys. I think, there's some concern to be had there. I want to move on to our next guy, James Robinson. Johnny, this is another hot topic for a lot of fantasy GMs out there. And so let's just start it off. Let's do a little recap of what Robinson was able to do. RB7 in PPR and in standard, even missed his final 2 games. Undrafted. We had the Fournette trade. We had Divine Azigbo injury. Raquel Armstead went to COVID. Chris Thompson was added. And so remember here, we had Mac from Saturday Snap Up for the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast on the mock draft a couple weeks ago. And he was saying, James Robinson's getting overhyped. Do not do not fall for it. Don't go draft him. Jaguars are going to bring somebody in. Even he didn't have anybody with him last year, and he made some great points. Okay, the bottom line is he had one game under 10.5 PPR points all last year. He averaged 14.4 fantasy points per game. We talked about this. And so I just think that this is a guy that was really good. So Johnny, we've got to talk to Whisper Nation and work through this. And I'm going to bounce the mic over to you here in a little bit and what your take is. What are we supposed to do with James Robinson? Because as of right now, they didn't bring anybody in. They didn't sign anybody in free agency of no. Well, I'm sorry. They signed.
Carlos Hyde.
Hyde,
come on.
But that's not.
People want to people want to paint this picture of don't go chasing James Robinson, dude. Just please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. That's what they're trying to tell me. But here's the thing, though. We just had
that's what they're trying to tell you, but
we just talked for 8 minutes about Jonathon Taylor and how great he was and like how we expect him or what his potential cap and ceiling could be. And I don't think enough people are talking about not only what James Robinson did last year by storing onto the story late and the scene late and being a fantasy darling for you. Let's look at what else he did last year. He had the most runs of 10 plus yards. Jonathon Taylor, who we just talked about for 8 minutes, had 35 of those. James Robinson was second behind him, Travis, with 31 of those. Jonathon Taylor, but so you would say, okay, well that just begs.
This is the argument that I think just baffles me, is that people are like, well, he didn't have anybody to compete with. Yeah, that doesn't take away from the pack or take away from the fact that he was damn good.
Right.
Good at football last year.
And to that case in point, Travis, I'll tell you how good exactly he was. If you look at Jonathon Taylor, so yeah, we just said 35 runs that he had of 10 yards. James Robinson had only 31, but Jonathon Taylor carried the ball 232 times. And so that averages out to be a 10-yard run pretty much every 6.6 carries. James Robinson managed 240 carries, which was sixth most in the league, by the way. And he ran for 10 plus yards on roughly average 7.7 carries, Travis. So he is doing things just as much, and they're just as impressive. He's just not as big of a name. And so here's this is all of that, and all this excitement is wrapping me up to tell you that if you going into this season, you have to be a believer in James Robinson, because the vast majority of people aren't. So all of these other guys that we're going to talk, or the most majority of these guys that we're going to talk about, you can draft them. And if you whiff on them, unless it's like very plainly obvious that, the season's not going in the direction of that running back, most of these guys are going to carry their weight because of the value of their name, right? You'll be able to trade them even if their value is even slightly lower. A guy like James Robinson is going to be hard to trade people because they're already not buying in. And if he doesn't meet those expectations, then it's going to struggle a little even more. So I'm going to tell people, I believe in James Robinson. I do think that where he's going might be a little high, just because there are a lot of unknowns still and there are a lot of guys that we're going to talk about here that I frankly, I just like their positions just a little bit more. And, but I'm just saying, if you were going in and thinking about, hey, should I take James Robinson? You have to be a full believer, because guaranteed a lot of the people in your league aren't full believers. So it's going to be more difficult to trade him later if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think James Robinson is being slept on in a lot of ways here, and I think he's going to be one of those guys you could at least, and it will really depend. I mean, if they bring in somebody electric like an ETN, you're going to have to be a little bit worried. Right. You're going to have to be a little bit worried about James Robinson's value. But I think that if it stays where it's at now, as of today, with James Robinson here, I love it. I love where he's priced. I love what he did last year. And I love that he's a guy that wasn't drafted. So you're going to get a lot of knock on him for how good he actually is. And he just put it. The proof was in the pudding, so to speak. Yeah. He got it done last year. Want to hit a couple. We got an active chat today. Obviously, we're doing this show on second-year running back, so I want to give credence to that. But I want to just get in here and just say, Joz Whedon coming in with some hard-hitting questions here. He says, ahi sashimi or smoked salmon? Johnny, I'll let you take that one.
I'll do smoked salmon.
Yeah, I do love me some smoked salmon. I do love some ahi, though, as well.
Yeah.
Joz Whedon has one more question here. This one actually is, kind of football related here. Rookie pick 1.2, assuming Harris is gone. Would you take Chase, ETN, Williams, or T. Law? Johnny, I think that the answer will obviously depend on where these guys are landing, but, supreme situations, who do you like here the most?
I think you got to go ETN. I've been hearing a lot of rumblings that ETN will actually be like the first running back off the board. That's kind of a lot of like upset, like surprise, draft day trade things that a lot of people are predicting to happen, is that ETN actually is the number one. And so of course, like, you have to look at that just like we looked at that for CEH last year. He wasn't necessarily the number one running back coming in, or as far as fantasy consensus goes, and then Chiefs took him number one, or as far as running back position goes, and then the rest is history. So I will say I am keeping a very, very close eye on where Williams goes. I think he's a tremendous talent. There are a lot of people coming out that are comping him to Nick Chubb. You all know how much I love Nick Chubb on this show, and now Big Travis trying to steal my thunder and join the Nick Chubb bandwagon. But that's definitely a guy that I would potentially, depending on landing spot, I would possibly pick number 2 overall over ETN. But as of right now, ETN is the number 2 running back that you take.
Okay, and then Roxana, this is Roxana Renata Ashley Bella. Thank you for joining us over on Facebook. Appreciate you. She said, what should my Cowboys do? Or he or she, I'm sorry. I think it might be she. What should my Cowboys do at QB till Dak gets 100%? And what should they do defensive side of the ball? So I'll answer the first one with Dak. It sounds like everything I've read so far this offseason, we're still very early on in the process, but it sounds like Dak's going to be ready for week 1. Everything I have read seems to indicate that he will be ready for week 1. Now, if he's not ready, I think it'll be like 1 or 2 weeks that he's not ready. And then you're probably looking at something like Ben DiNucci for a couple weeks, which is not something you want right now. But with Andy Dalton leaving, you don't have the veteran presence. Now, they could go pick somebody up. Josh McCown's still sitting there trying to get the Houston head coaching job. You could definitely sign him for a couple week contract and get him in there. I could see something like that. Defensive side of the ball, I think they started by getting rid of a guy who hadn't been playing or coaching football in a while, and Nolan, and then they brought in Dan Quinn as the coordinator. So I thought that was a good move. I think that's the best they can do right now, is to get the good leadership in there. But remember, just to not to make you feel bad, Cowboys fan here, but Mike McCarthy's never really had elite defenses, even in all of his time in Green Bay. That was a calling card there. All right, so moving on, Johnny, we're going to talk about another exciting second-year running back, and that is Cam Akers. He's the RB 46 in PPR last year, RB 42 in standard. He only had 3 games over 15 carries all year, Johnny. This Rams offense has a big pie, though. 471 carries put the Rams as the number 7 most voluminous rushing attack in the NFL last year. And you look at what Akers was able to do, accounted for only 30% of the team's rushing market share. That was the highest among the Rams' 3 backs, but he was responsible for only 19% of the team's target market share to the running backs, which was the lowest of all 3 of the backs they had last year. He missed 3 games with a high ankle sprain and some rib cartilage separation, so he was a little bit dinged up. Then you look at Malcolm Brown, who's now left the team. This was one of those coaches' pets favorites of Sean McVay over his time there. Guy that did the dirty work, blocked, plunged it into the red zone. He's gone now. 101 carries have exited and vacated this offense. That's 21% of the market share. 33 targets, Johnny. That's 46% of that Rams running back target market share. So a big chunk of the targets, another semi-good chunk of the carries are there for Cam Akers. And then you have, of course, the biggest thing, which is more of a puff piece that's come out in this offseason, and that is that Sean McVay views Cam Akers as an every down back. Look, This is not a surprise to many that have seen him play. He looks like a guy who, if he gets volume, can do it. When we saw him at Florida State, he always had a horrible line and was still able to get the work done. When we saw that the Rams drafted him high, just a year after drafting Darrell Henderson with some decent capital, we can see that the Rams wanted Cam Akers and Sean McVay wanted Cam Akers. And now the cherry on top, Johnny, all of this working for Cam Akers, and you get in Matt Stafford, who is a guy who can continue to throw the ball for first downs and keep drives alive and get you down into the red zone. So I think Cam Akers is pretty well priced at the end of the second round here. This is probably where you want to take him. And I think he's one of the guys who could easily shoot into top 8, top 6, top 5 based on what we've seen the Rams offense do before. And we have never seen a quarterback in that Rams offense, which produced Todd Gurley at 2 years of back-to-back RB1. We never saw him with a quarterback the caliber of Matt Stafford. So that's the point I'm making here, is that there is an elite ceiling for Cam Akers, maybe more than any of those guys in the second year or in the second round where those guys are going.
I think that's the most fired up I've seen you get over any of these second-year running backs, Travis. I do agree with you. I think Cam Akers is going to be a really popular pick this year to be that, like, outside of the first round, what running back is, potential to be finish as the number 1 overall running back. I think, a lot of people are going to put their hat in the ring for, Cam Akers. The opportunity's there. The talent looks to be there. And then, like you said, getting Matthew Stafford, I think that's a huge, huge bonus for this offense. And I think it's going to help them move the ball a lot more effectively and efficiently. Cam Akers is going to be a really good pick in the second round.
Yeah, I just think it's just set up so nicely for him. The upside is definitely there. We want to know what you think, Whisper Nation. Let us know in whatever comment on whatever platform you are, what you think of Cam Akers and the rest of these second-year guys we're talking about. And also, if you're new, give us a like, give us a follow. Roxana over on Facebook just gave us a follow on Facebook. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter. We're everywhere. We appreciate everyone in here. Awen Kelly, who we believe is new to the channel, thanks for coming in. Thanks for helping us continue to do this. We're going to continue on here with the second-year running backs, and we're going to go with J.K. Dobbins. So similar to the Rams, the Baltimore Ravens were a very voluminous running team, and they were the most. No team in the NFL ran more than the Baltimore Ravens. 555 attempts for 3,071 yards. They were a machine running the football. But 28% of that market share belonged to Lamar Jackson, Johnny. Dobbins, 134 carries, actually ranked third behind both Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards last year. That's 24% of the market share. A lot of people will claim that Ingram's exit will spell automatic upside for Dobbins, but that's only vacating 13% or 72 carries from last year's offense. So that's still a good chunk. You'd like to see him increase there, but is it enough to put him above a guy like Akers or Antonio Gibson, who we'll talk about next? I don't know. He was hyper efficient, 6.0 yards per carry. He led all Ravens in targets and receptions. It's just going to be about predicting his upside in an offense whose leading rusher is their quarterback. So, Johnny, I just don't know if we can accurately do that in redraft leagues to say that Dobbins is going to be a surefire, particular guy that we can count on as the RB1 that you're getting in that second round. And I would rather sit there and take a Cam Akers, who we just talked about, a James Robinson, who we just talked about, even a David Montgomery, who we'll talk about on a different podcast. But these are guys that are going similar or later that I'm more interested in than Dobbins, and trying to say, yes, he's going to hit on every upside here, because Gus Edwards is still with the team. Lamar Jackson is still with the team, dominating touches. And it just gets hard for me. Do you think, though, that something comes over Harbaugh this year? Because Harbaugh's been known to give a guy the keys in a rushing team. Will he give the keys to Dobbins and say, okay, Edwards, now you scoot down to a 15% market share, a 20% market share, and we're going to give 30, 40, 50% market share to a guy like Dobbins? Do we take some of Lamar's rushing share down? Is that going to happen?
I just don't see that happening, unless, like, the only way I could see that legitimately happening, and even in the scenario that I'm going to talk about, it wouldn't benefit Dobbins, right? Like, the only way it happens is if Lamar starts throwing more, right? And he gets, like, more accurate and comfortable with throwing. I'm not just saying, like, oh, Lamar needs to throw more, because I do agree on that. But I'm saying, like, he gets comfortable enough to be like, where it's more of like, it's his first nature. I'm going to run such a athlete, and he can run and a lot of DBs and defensive players. So his first thing is, like, not necessarily always to pass when he scrambles out. It's like, I want to look to run. If Lamar changes that to throwing, then they could potentially move the ball more, have a little bit more opportunity. But you're still, I mean, we had a great video about this very thing last year that we made specifically based on this backfield, where we talked about what is the effect that a running quarterback have on or a mobile quarterback have on a running back. And it was actually, it negatively affected the running back. And when it showed this year, and then when you're talking about splitting your carries once more with Gus Edwards, who, let's face it, we all can agree that we think Dobbins is the better athlete. And, you know, if he were to get that workload, sure, he would be fantastic and he would be able to hit those high ceilings. But I think you're drafting him right now where he would have to do, like, that would have to be the case. And I just think that, you know, we look too much into that 1 year with Mark Ingram, where Mark Ingram kind of popped off, and we're like, oh, like, they're willing to go with a one running back system. I don't think that's the case, especially because they re-signed Gus Edwards and it works. Like, they are effectively running the ball, and I don't see why they would need to change that at all. So I think Dobbins is a guy that I'm actually moving down my list quite a bit because of that very, very case.
Yeah, and we'll get to explore this a little bit more and see what the final roster looks like and what we're hearing out of Baltimore as well. But I do think it's a little concerning that we're getting so hyped up for Dobbins, who only had 24% of the rushing market share, only stands to increase that by vacated rushing by 13%, and that's if he got all 72 carries from Mark Ingram. I don't know that that's enough for me to tip the needle. Do I think that Lamar probably runs less than 28% of the market share next year? Yes. I do think that they do that. I do think that they're trying. They were in talks with a bunch of guys in free agency, right? So they definitely want to gear it that way. I do believe, unlike my cohort here, that Lamar Jackson can improve as a passer. He did it every year in the NFL except for the last year, and every year in college.
What have you done for me lately, baby? That's what I want to know.
I understand that. And we'll probably have, this will be a heavily debated topic all year, but I do think that there is a world where he can get there. I just don't know if he's safer than even a DeAndre Swift, who we'll talk about in a little bit, an Antonio Gibson, a Cam Akers, and these other second-year guys. He's probably my least favorite workload-wise, even if he's one of my favorites talent-wise in those guys. And so for that reason, I'm out. No, wanted to give my best Shark Tank impression there. We're going to move on to the next guy. Yeah, we're going to move on to the next guy, which is Antonio Gibson. Johnny, I want you to take the mic here on Antonio Gibson, because if I got the mic, I might be talking for 2 hours about how excited I am for Antonio Gibson here.
Oh, man, I might just do that as well. I am more and more getting on the bandwagon of Antonio Gibson. I will give, this is not, financial, or this isn't fantasy advice, but I did go out and trade for Antonio Gibson this offseason in Dynasty. So I'm really excited for the potential that he has. But let's recap a little bit, and then I'll tell you why I'm so excited for Antonio Gibson. So last year he finished as the RB12 in both standard and half PPR. He played on 45.4% of snaps, which only amounted to about 170 carries for 795 yards. And in spite of being touted as one of the most elusive wide receivers, that he was a wide receiver, he turned running back. He only saw 44 targets last year, Travis, which is a very, very low for a running back who we presume can carry or can catch the ball very well. But despite all of that, Travis, he had more points per game than CEH, DeAndre Swift, Dobbins, and Cam Akers. And he played, he didn't, as we know, he had turf toe, so he didn't even play on all 16 games. He played on 13, I believe that was, sorry, I have to double check that number of games. But during that time, he had 11 touchdowns, Travis, which tied with Jonathon Taylor for the most rushing touchdowns there, or most touchdowns. And here's the big thing as why I'm so excited about Antonio Gibson. Last year, he saw J.D. McKissick saw 110 targets. 110 targets to J.D. McKissick. That's absolutely absurd. I'm hoping that this year, as they should, they won't throw to McKissick as much. Those targets should go to Gibson. And I think that if you raise Gibson's, let's say Gibson gets half of those. Now, I do understand as well, we don't have check down Alex Smith as the quarterback. And so that's where a lot of those McKissick targets came from, was from him. And so I don't expect them to have that many total targets to the running back position, Travis. I do still think that they haven't fully utilized Gibson to his full extent. I think that they were kind of easing him into that role, and then he got injured right when they were about to really let off the training wheels for him. And so I think that Antonio Gibson is one of the best values. People are excited about him, but they don't know the true potential.
The excitement is trickling into our chat right now, and I want to get in on this. Darius Rice says, I'm super high on Gibson, but he only carried the rock 170 times last year, maybe in for some regression. I think that's a fair point to talk about. I think it's also fair to realize that this team was not as good as we would want them to be last year, right? There was their first year under Scott Turner and with Ron Rivera and then that offense, and they were going through just what is a dumpster fire at quarterback. No offense to Alex Smith, but this was not Alex Smith that we know and love before. This is Alex Smith, as Johnny said, dink and dunk, dump off Alex Smith. So I think now with a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick who opens up the offense, right? And then you have another year in this system for some of the other players. You bring in a guy, and I think this is one of the most underrated signings all offseason was Curtis Samuel going to Washington, which should help this offense tremendously push the offense forward. So maybe we can actually say that carrying the rock 170 times was a product of how bad the offense was, and we could see some positive regression for the offense, making that pie a little bit bigger for Gibson. So I actually think that we counteract that a little bit. A1 Kelly says, that's my fear with JT. Think he will be excellent, especially later in the year and when needed, but game script may have an ugly rotation. The Colts are a little bit different, and I don't want to keep banging the drum on JT. We already kind of discussed him a little bit. We need to get through some of these other guys, but the Colts are a little bit different to me. I trust that offense a whole lot more than I trust Washington. I trust that pie to be a whole lot bigger. So, yeah, well, I think that Jonathon Taylor probably doesn't belong in the top 5 and maybe belongs more towards the end of round 1. I think that that's a situation where the offenses are a little bit better. They project to be better. So, in that case, I think that's where we're getting there. And Joss Whedon wants to know, Johnny, what did you give for Antonio Gibson? You mentioned trading him here.
Oh.
So a little bit of dynasty advice. Let's peel back the curtain here and make sure you tell the truth, because I'm also in that dynasty league. I don't want to have to flash a screenshot up here and show people what you actually gave.
I actually the main piece. So I would have to pull up here. Let me just pull up the I'll tell you the exact trade, but the main
couple picks, your firstborn child.
No, it wasn't like that much. No. So I had basically I gave up the number 1 pick overall. It was like a combo of deals, right? So I gave up the number 1 pick, and I end up getting Justin Jefferson and the 109 pick. And then I flipped Justin Jefferson. I have a lot of wide receivers. So then I ended up trading Justin Jefferson basically for Antonio Gibson. So, I mean, there were some other bits and parts of draft picks in there, but I'm trying to find it, and I can't seem to find the exact.
Smitty is in the house. Want to say what's up to the Fantasy Football Show, a.k.a. Smitty, a.k.a. Fantasy
Smitty?
Football. We gotta say, Smitty's one of the goats. Go follow him if you're not already. Make sure you're over following the Fantasy Football Show over on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. He puts out content. We need to get on a collab here soon with you, Smitty. But yeah, that's kind of our take on Antonio Gibson. I know, Darius, you're asking here about Cam Akers. You've asked a little bit about Jonathon Taylor. We're going to be posting this video right back to the channel and then also on audio, so you can go back there and see what we said. We already covered those guys there. But yeah, we're pretty high. At least I'm pretty high on Cam Akers at current ADP. I think a lot makes sense based on what's going on with the backfield and the vacated rushing workflow there. I want to talk about Johnny's boy DeAndre Swift. I'm gonna start and spit a little bit of fire here about DeAndre Swift and let Johnny catch up. I know I don't know if he knows any of this stuff, but I'm gonna try and school him a little bit on his boy Swift. Obviously, DeAndre Swift kind of flashed some brilliance last year. RB 18 in PPR, RB 20 in standard. In his last 10 games, Swift had double-digit fantasy points in 8 of those games. That was in half-point PPR scoring. He had 5 or more targets in 8 games last season, was 13th in the NFL in targets among running backs with 57, only received 32% of the team's rushing market share last year. So we look at that. We look at 50 targets that are going to be vacated by running backs no longer with Detroit coming into this year. 43% of Detroit rushing market share is also vacated. We've got Anthony Lynn coming to town as offensive coordinator. We got Dan Campbell coming to town with ties to New Orleans and Miami. We've got Jared Goff coming to town as well. And if you look at that, I have a chart. If you guys go over to the website, thefantasywhispers.com, you look at articles there. I have a NFC North breakdown for article there. And you can see a chart that I put here that basically shows all these different things that are working in DeAndre Swift's favor for his targets per game and his catches per game based on people that have worked with these guys before. You look at Todd Gurley, who had 2 of his best years with Jared Goff. Alvin Kamara, who was under the Campbell assistant head coaching position in New Orleans for 4 years. Melvin Gordon, who had 3 years with Anthony Lynn as his head coach. Austin Eckler, same story, 3 years with Anthony Lynn as his head coach. So you could look at all these ways that these different things work as a cocktail for DeAndre Swift on the very situation, just on the very basis that he's going to increase as a pass catcher. And so that alone, plus the vacated Adrian Peterson rushing market share, plus if they end up cutting Kerryon Johnson, which would be even more of the vacated rushing share, although I don't know that happens, we're going to see a situation where Swift is basically guaranteed to be in workload wise, an RB2 or better. And I think Swift's upside alone makes him one of my favorites. Him, behind Cam Akers there, but I think that he's definitely a guy that we're really excited about.
a bunch of people jumping in here for
Yeah, we see Lando in here.
What's
Lando
up?
works over at Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, one of our brother stations. Make sure you hit them up on YouTube as well.
And then let's see. Smitty asks, hot take. Turn the audio down for a second, Johnny. As you just traded him, Justin Jefferson is 1 to 2 for wide receivers this year. I agree. I like him a lot. I found the trade, so this was the exact one. Okay, I traded Justin Jefferson, Anthony McFarland, a fourth rounder next year, and 212 this year for Antonio Gibson and 202 this year. So the reason, once again, I have my wide receivers I do agree that Justin Jefferson is a dominant wide receiver. I love him. But my other wide receivers right now are Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, DJ Moore, and CeeDee Lamb. And then I also have DJ Chark and Antonio Brown on my bench. So I needed some more running back depth, so I made the move. I liked it. But yeah, Justin Jefferson, we'll talk about him on Friday's show for sure. And I'm glad, Travis, that you were able to, talk a little bit about DeAndre Swift and finally, see a little bit of why I'm so excited about DeAndre Swift. Whisper Nation knows how much I love him, so I don't need to talk about him.
All right, let's talk CEH here, Johnny. He's our next guy. So why don't you just tell a little bit of Whisper Nation what you saw out of CEH last year and how we're feeling coming into this next year? Because I think a bounce back could be definitely in store for CEH as a guy that, especially now with Damian Williams out the door and some other things going on.
Yeah, CH is one of the guys that I actually think is really undervalued right now in redraft leagues and in Dynasty, because the trade, or like we were talking earlier on this show, right? We had CH was the number one running back taken last year's draft. He wasn't projected to be, so everyone got on the hype train. CH, and then we had Damian Williams opt out of the season. So then everyone and their mother wanted in on this bandwagon of CEH, and he jumped all the way up to the first round. And because of that, everyone attached this massive, everyone, and I get it. We are all guilty of this, Travis. We all do this, but we put his ceiling automatically in place and said this is what he's going to get, and he failed at that. He failed at whatever that pie in the sky dream was that everyone was envisioning for CH. It didn't come true. But this is what he did do. 60% snap share. He had 181 carries for 803 yards, which was 17th in the league. He had 36 targets on 36 receptions, on 55 targets for 297 yards, which was 19th in the league. He did have 4 drops, which I think he'll be able to work on. I'm not really concerned about his drops. But here's where the big part, Travis, of where his downfall was. It wasn't necessarily in the amount of carries and yardage. Like I just told you, he was about par, right, of where he would be his rookie year. But he only had 5 total touchdowns, which was 2.3%. And that's the big area. We had this idea in our mind that it was a walk-in shoe-in that CH would be getting 10 touchdowns, and it didn't end up being that. And I will say some of the things that I did like in CH and why I'm turning around on him as a very big bargain, because you're getting him now at the back of the second round, early third, which is where he was originally going last year before the Damian Williams news, which I think is right because he had 8 goal line carries. That's pretty healthy. He did get stuff there, so we'll see as he gets into the second year, right? Run blocking efficiency for Kansas City was the worst. It was 70.1. But even with it that bad, he still evaded 48 tackles on 236 touches. So that's 17th in the league. He's super evasive. He was one of the highest rated rookie running backs, according to PFF. He was the 3rd highest. And so when you look at all the data and you take a step back, yes, did he disappoint for where he was going last year? Yes, but was that his fault particularly? No. And then if you look at what Kansas City generally likes to do, well, who are we comparing him to all last year, Travis? Or who was Kansas City saying he was like? Brian Westbrook. And what did we say last year when this came out? I said, Brian, like, pump the brakes real quick, because Brian Westbrook took a minute to catch up to this offense. It's very complex. But once he did, he was one of the best running backs. And I think that's what you're going to get from CEH this year.
Yeah, I don't have any major qualms with what you're talking about here, and I think CEH did need some time. I think a lot of these rookies took some time. You look at Taylor, who we talked about at the top of the show, took some time to knock some rust off. We've seen that happen for rookie RBs, even in a year where they got some of those regular season or preseason reps that we said these guys couldn't get. I think pretty much for me, CEH is a guy for not only positive regression based on what he did last year, but positive regression for that team to run the ball more because we know they want to do that. We have some comments popping up here. Johnny, you want to play? You want to fire some of these up and see if
which ones you want?
Yeah, so
we got Love CH from
Smitty
Football
saying
Show.
Jaws a little while up said he asked a question for these guys. Wanted to ask Smitty about Henderson a must cuff for Akers. To which Smitty responded, "Not sure what the Rams will do if Akers goes down. Hard to trust that staff." Jaws following up, Hendo looked pretty good in a couple of those games. Rocked my Seahawks a bit. Yeah, I think Henderson actually is the handcuff. Like, I have to be honest. I think Henderson is a guy that's shown juice on tape. We don't know what to do with the coaching staff, but Malcolm Brown, who was the big variable in this, is now out the door. Now, they'll probably bring somebody in with a later pick, but not anybody that I think would know the offense better than Darrell Henderson and not, and cause Darrell Henderson to not be the second in line should anything happen to Akers. So for me, Henderson is the guy. And I think Henderson's being a little bit undervalued as a late guy in drafts that could absolutely break out for you should something happen to Akers, should Akers stumble. Not that I think any of that will happen, but I think that, what you got to do in drafts is take dart throws. And I think Henderson's one of the most exciting dart throws there is, just based on his juice alone. And then the offense being the cog in this wheel, especially with Stafford coming to town. Mm-hmm. Sorry we couldn't get to that question sooner, Jaws, but appreciate you asking. Appreciate Smitty helping out there in the comments as well. Johnny, I want to talk a little bit about A.J. Dillon and Zack Moss. Those are our final two backs in the second-year guys. These are a little bit less exciting, a little bit less sexy of the guys that are going, but we need to talk about them because they're second-year guys that could have an impact. Similar to the Darrell Henderson situation, you might want to stack some of these guys as lottery tickets. We look at A.J. Dillon. He's, reminder here, rookie running back last year. He had the Derrick Henry size measurables, was going to be playing with Matt LaFleur. Everybody went goo gaga over his thighs last year. Only sizable usage was that monster game against Tennessee. It was a game in the snow. He went 21 for 124 with 2 touchdowns. He's likely going to get the majority of Jamal Williams' 119 carries, if not all of those. That's 26% of last year's market share to add on there. He was efficient in a small sample size last year, 46 for 242 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 5.26 yards per carry. Johnny, he's an exciting specimen. He's an exciting guy and an exciting offense, but there's a guy that's way more exciting than him as the RB1 for this team, and that's Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones is a proven commodity. Aaron Jones is a guy that has Alvin Kamara-like efficiency. Aaron Jones is a guy that got paid like a top running back in the league. So nothing on the surface tells you that A.J. Dillon is going to be some rock star for you, but he's definitely one of the higher valued handcuffs for me. He's definitely a guy that could fit right into a role with more volume, and we'll see what Green Bay, of course, does in the draft for running back. They will most assuredly take a running back. They're going to definitely draft one, watching Jamal Williams go. It's just where and what capital, and given that they just did A.J. Dillon in the second round, I can't imagine they're going to be going for higher capital than Dillon. So Dillon, to me, purely a handcuff, but definitely one of the more exciting handcuffs there are in the NFL. All right, Johnny, bring us home with Zack Moss. Let's talk a little bit about Zack Moss. Obviously, I know what I'm going to get here, giving you the mic to talk about Zack Moss. I will take it on the chin here for Zack Moss last year. I do still think, should nothing change in the Buffalo backfield, that Zack Moss is the guy to go and grab because he is the guy who projects to be a better all-around running back. But we have some concerns, obviously, with what Josh Allen does in the red zone as a runner. We have some concerns with what this team did as a running football team last year. And so then we have concerns about Zack Moss, which I'll let you kind of go into.
Yeah, I shouldn't have let you, I was standing so firm and strong that Zack Moss, I want no part of him. I didn't like him last year. And I went on several podcasts proclaiming how much I didn't want to take him and I didn't like him. And you know what? I listened to you in Chelsea long enough. And so I fell for the, I fell for the cookies.
I didn't ask for this monologue about how bad your life is. Tell me about Zack Moss.
I don't know if you're going to want to know about Zack Moss after I tell you, but all right. He had 44.9% snap share. So he didn't even play. I do know we do know he was a little injured there and banged up. So he did miss some time with that, but even on the season, he only had 112 carries for 481 yards. So he averaged 37 yards per game. He only saw 18 targets last year. That was this big knock thing, or that was the big whole argument for him coming in. He was going to take the receiving workload from Devin Singletary, and that just didn't happen. Only saw 14 receptions off of those 18 targets, so not a very good conversion rate there. And then you look at this. Percentage of runs for 10 plus yards. We talked about it with some of the running backs earlier, but I just want to compare Singletary and Zack Moss because I don't even know if Zack Moss is the better running back in this backfield. Zack Moss had 10% of his runs break for 10 or plus yards. That was 31st out of 50 running backs. Devin Singletary wasn't that much greater, but he was at 13%, but that ranks 11th out of 50 running backs. And then if you look at his missed tackles, Zack Moss, that was another thing that Zack Moss was supposed to be really good at coming out of college, is breaking tackles, missed tackles. He's a beast. He's got big thighs, just like A.J. Dillon. But unfortunately, he only had he was 19th in missed tackles, where Devin Singletary was 11th in missed tackles. Singletary, you're looking at yards yards after contact, yak, as we like to say on this show. Zack Moss was 26th, where Singletary was 14th. I am very concerned about Zack Moss. I think it goes further than, we could say the COVID stuff and all of that. I am genuinely worried that Zack Moss is not a good runner and not a good running back. And I don't know if Buffalo thinks that as well. The stats would indicate, we weren't really high on Devin Singletary. That was the real answer, by the way. Like, I got that wrong as well, because the real answer to the entire question wasn't, hey, would you rather have Singletary or Zack Moss? It was, hey, you should just stay away from this as a whole. It will be interesting to see if the Bills do draft a running back. If Najee Harris goes there, Travis Etienne, then you could hear there would be some panic there for both people who have Zack Moss and Singletary. But I don't know, Travis. I don't know if I would I think I'm just going to stay away from Zack Moss completely. I mean, the nice thing is, unlike these.
It's really going to depend on what they do in the draft. And we talked a little bit about this on the last mock draft. It's like, if it stays as it is, you should probably make a decision on one of the guys. And you can look at the stats you just said and say, I think Zack Moss is bad at football, and I think that Singletary is a little bit better, and I think I'm going to go with the talent here and go with Singletary. I choose to look at this as a couple reasons. Obviously, because of the tape I watched last year on Zack Moss and how I still am holding on to a little bit of a bias and a belief in Zack Moss, I'm going to say things like this. But he was a rookie last year who needed time to get into the chops and do what he had to do. Then he got hurt. So I don't think that he got to do everything he needed to do. I think that he's got a longer learning curve coming from a smaller school. I could see that being the case as well. You look at situations for Zack Moss in this Buffalo backfield where it was a team that did not run the ball a ton because it didn't need to, because it threw all over the place. That's going to change most likely. Usually when those teams are big in throwing and low in rushing, the pendulum swings back the next year and they even out a little bit. I think there will be more of a rushing pie for this team next year, and I think that's going to be part of it. And I think if it stays as it is, no Najee Harris, no Travis Etienne, no second round running back. If they get somebody later on, I'm going to still put my hat in the ring on Zack Moss, because I think he projects to be better than he was last year. This team projects to be a better rushing team than it was last year, and that alone would make him worth a stab in the dark. And I think he's going to be priced right, Johnny. I think he's going to be priced really right.
Yeah, he's free. So
Yeah,
that is the right price.
Because I think people are going to be as burned as what you said, but like we give credit to running backs that take a while to get going. I mean, that has been the case before, so I don't see why it couldn't be the case. And if they end up being, loving Zack Moss enough to let him do the thing, then I think that could be a situation. All right. Well, we want to know what you think, Whisper Nation. If you're new to the channel, make sure you're hitting that subscribe on any platform you're on. You're following us on all the social media platforms. We appreciate everybody here that has joined us today. Everybody was very active in the chat. A couple of our colleagues out there in the industry coming in here. We really appreciate the love, and we're excited. This is full-blown off-season schedule. We've been going live every 3 days every week, and we're putting out content. Articles are coming out. There'll be a new article out tomorrow. So thank you for the support. Make sure you head over to thefantasywhispers.com and check us out there, and let us know in the comments below which your favorite second-year running back it is. Johnny, any final thoughts for the people?
Yeah. Did you change your mind on any of these two rathers in the beginning? Zeke or JT? You still go Zeke, right?
Yeah, I think there are concerns with JT's upside that kind of scare me off of where he's going ADP wise.
Okay. And then I know that you're still taking Cam or Aaron Jones over Cam Akers.
Yeah, I love Cam Akers where he's priced. Aaron Jones is priced at the end of the first round, beginning of the second, for reasons. Look, Cam Akers is what we want. Like, Cam Akers wants to be Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones has done it and proved it. And so, like, we need to just say this is what Aaron Jones is and draft him.
He just has a picture of Aaron Jones in his locker.
Yeah, he wears Aaron Jones pajamas to bed, dude.
I mean, who wouldn't, realistically? Yeah. All right, just to go, still Tyreek over James Robinson?
Yeah.
Okay. Still Dobbins over Eckler? I think I would go Eckler.
I think Dobbins. I'm going Eckler over Dobbins.
All right, we got one change. We got one change. All right, CEH or Miles Sanders?
I like CEH.
Okay, and Gibson over Joe Mixon?
Yeah, I think so. Still,
that one's really close for me.
That one's close.
And then Swift over David Montgomery.
Yeah, I love Swift's upside. Montgomery just doesn't have the juice that Swift has. I think that's just the thing for me.
And then the last, I know this hurts, Zack Moss. You still choosing that delight over Zack Moss after those sexy stats?
We're taking the shakes, man.
All right, man. That's it. That's all I got today.
For Johnny Game Time Hicks, I'm Big Travie. We're the Fantasy Whispers. Thanks for joining us today, guys. We're out. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF